This is the Working in Hell podcast with your host, Vinny Blasio. Each episode, Vinny takes you inside the world of New York State Corrections, focusing on both corrections officer and law enforcement issues. And now your host, Vinny Blasio.
Hey, hello everyone. This is Vinny Blasio, and I'm here once again with your Working in Hell podcast. You can find me on all the local platforms for where you can find your podcasts, and also workinginhell.com. So first, I'd like to take this time to wish everyone a happy Veterans Day. Obviously, that was a couple days ago, but we want to take our time and thank everyone who has served, those past, present, and future. So we'd like to honor the veterans for today. So getting into this week's podcast, we're on episode 13. For those that are keeping track, we wanted to know that obviously last week was the election. So we had a lot of different results in New York, obviously getting past the presidential elections, but just looking at some of the outcomes that we're seeing in New York were kind of surprising. Those in what I call high crime areas, I was a little shocked to see some of the results in the Rochester area. So it just seems like that's going to be more of the same. So with that, while we're talking about high crime, I just wanted to this is the Docs fact sheet for November 1st. Now, this was kind of buried, unusual. Docs usually post their displays in order on their research page, but this one from someone from their research I was speaking to, and they let me know that it was kind of buried a little bit. So I was shocked to see that. But just looking at that, you can see that the new records have been broken. And one of the things that even since this was dated as of November 1st, and today I'm broadcasting on November 14th, is we look at the inmate on inmate assaults. There it is showing that it is 2450. And now we are looking at, with just this week alone, going into the week of November 10th, that we're looking at inmate assaults are at 2,529. So we're obviously shattering records here, not good records to be broken. So it's even up from the November 1st that they have posted. And the inmate on staff assaults, we're looking at previously 1760 when this report was released for November 1st. But as of the beginning of this week, we're looking at a new broken record of 1,823. That is absolutely disgusting. That's where the department is headed. New broken records. We can all surmise why. But there it is. And when you look at some of the other records that you're going at, the inmate attempted suicides are obviously up from last year. There's another homicide that happened. We discussed the last podcast, so I don't know if that's been reported to Docs because it doesn't look like they updated their homicide statistics on their sheet, but now that should be showing, I believe, at least two. The contraband last week, I think we're hitting to get shattered a record of contraband being found at 4,064. I think that number is, if I'm not mistaken. Don't hold me to that. But this record I do know is up there, is that we're looking at use of chemical agents, 47 as opposed to last year, which was 21. Going back to 2022, incidents of use of chemical agents was at 22. So we're at 47 for this year, for those that are keeping track. And even on the parole side, there was a civilian death by parolee, so that increased by one. And then we have a parolee death by suicide. That was also increased by one. But the statistics speak for themselves. We can all surmise as far as the HALT Act, some of the other lack of discipline. We discussed that in the last podcast as far as the survey that came out. And, I can argue all day long as far as the statistics, how they degrade injuries. We all know that at one time, Docs never even discussed the nature of degrees of injuries, where now they're saying none, moderate, serious, and what have you. If you look at slide 2 here, no injury, minor, moderate, serious, and severe. And I do not agree with those injuries because they downplay the injuries. And we'll get into that a little later. But the doc's fact sheet for itself just is showing the balloon of records. And as we get on to the news cycle, we're going to be discussing some of these assaults, which is again, the number, especially when you get onto the inmate on staff assaults at 1,823, blown the previous record out of the water. Just disgusting. And people often ask me, and they're like, Vinny, when we listen to your podcast, we see what you're posting on Twitter and Facebook and or X, I should say, and True Social and your different media sites and social media. Why do you have such a hatred for this? To be honest, that I do not hate the commissioner. And at one time, I think I spoke to it here that, I was in agreement that, he was the best person for the job at the time. And obviously, since then, I have, since his public protection hearings, I have changed my opinion on that. I do not hate anybody that goes against my beliefs, but I do not hate the commissioner. I hate what he's doing to the agency. I hate for his lack of, how could I balls, so to speak, how he doesn't stand up. Previous commissioners, going back previous from Brian Fisher, because we can get into stories on that. I could have a whole podcast on Brian Fisher alone. But previous to Brian Fisher, we had commissioners that would stick up to the governor, that would stick up for their employees and saying, if you want to lose an agency, then keep doing what you're doing and try to run my agency. We no longer have that. And as a matter of fact, now we have a commissioner that's a lapdog for certain senators in the New York State legislature, where it's absolutely disgusting the direction it's going. The statistics prove it. But I do not have a hatred to answer that for the commissioner, for anyone in the department. Matter of fact, most of my information comes directly from people that work under the commissioner. I'm not going to mention names and get them in trouble, but obviously a lot of this stuff and where they're telling me to find is coming directly from them. And docs obviously has to be careful on its own side because of the sooner or later, which has already happened. Like I mentioned last podcast, attorneys are reaching out because it's also unsafe for the inmates. New record there too. So I'm sure lawsuits are going to be happening for keeping the agency unsafe for the inmates. And that to me is also a correlation of the HALT Act because as you've seen from the death at a facility last week, we could surmise and say that was a direct correlation of the gangs running but I digress. We'll jump into some of the news that we have. The first one that we're going to get into, let's start, as I promised last week, we're going to get into the news cycle. So let me get the news for you here. So the first one is we get into the Vinny's news here is the new bill that was introduced yesterday by Senator Salazar. And this is an amendment to correction law. And by the way, she has raised a lot of money from labor groups. She's got, if you look on the website, and I'll give that to you in a minute, $137,121 she has raised from labor groups. Blows my mind. How anyone could give to this woman is beyond me. But obviously, she's no friend to law enforcement, no friend in the corrections with these crazy bills, and yet she has another one to amend what is defines the term cell and out of cell to clarify the meaning of cell confinement and what is deemed a cell and what is deemed out of cell. So common sense, again, does not apply in New York. And we're taking another round at Senator Salazar's bill, which is S9946, which will die at the end of session, die at the end of the year, but will be reintroduced. And people say that all these bills can't come into law, which we fought against HALT for years. And then finally it did come in to fruition and was codified into law. So when you say that these crazy things can't happen, they do happen. You can never dismiss when somebody introduces a bill and saying it's going to die. This probably will, because there's not enough time, but it will be introduced for next session. But in this, it's introduced by Senator Salazar, and it was introduced on November 12th, 2024. And I'll read the bill. And it is to Section 1, Section 2 of the correction law is amended by adding 3 new subdivisions, 35, 36, and 37, to read as follows. Section 35, cell means any room, area, or space that is used or is intended to be used as an incarcerated individual for sleep, or any room, area, or space that is not shared space conducive to meaningful congregate social interaction among many people in a group setting appropriate for the number of people in the space without physical barriers between people, where a person or persons are held for any purpose, or any room, area, or space that is not out of cell. Section 36 would add cell confinement means being in a cell. Section 37, out of cell, means being in a space outside of and in an area away from cell in a group setting, including group classrooms, open group, recreation, yard, group library or law library, group contact, visit room, or other equivalent space with many other people, all in the same shared space without physical barriers between people that is conducive to meaningful congregate social interaction and activity among the number of people in the space for purposes including congregate programming, congregate recreation, congregate contact visits, congregate library services, congregate law library services, congregate jobs, congregate meals, or equivalent congregate activities, or being in a space outside of and in an area away from a cell during the time of medical treatment, individual counseling, an attorney visit, or equivalent services in a setting conducive to provisions of such services with a person in custody in the same shared space within their services provided without physical barriers between them. All right, so lo and behold, there's another common sense, but we have to define cell and out of time cell. And obviously, with this goes more staff, which we've all heard of staffing crisis. So if we're going to take away time and not consider certain things out of time, or that's no longer going to be called cell time, then we're going to add out of cell time. Then that becomes labor staff intensive. Where's the money for that? Where's the staff for that? And do we really need these terms codified in law? It just blows my mind. And here is the bill for those that are following along. And as I said, this was just introduced November 12th, 2024. So common sense, as we've said many a times, no longer applies in New York State. We've seen how the agency is no longer run by anyone other than the governor and the New York State legislature. So obviously that's been a danger as more and more assaults are taking place. But let's keep adding to insult to injury by codifying more and more laws tying the hands of the agency. It's just mind-boggling, And the next, we'll read, because this is kind of in depth, and this is the record number of assault staff in New York prisons broken again. And this was done by the Press Republican. This was done by Joe Latempio. And we have, I'm going to read that for you. As you can see, it's also on the screen for those that are following along. But here, there's some caveats that are interesting because of the comments by docs. We've already seen in other press releases that this commissioner and the agency have come out and made threats. If staffing doesn't improve, if recruitment doesn't improve, we're going to close down 3 more jails, and so on and so forth. So we're right back to the threats again. I mean, it's just crazy. So we'll start off with the union representing correction officers in state prisons are continuing their plea that the state do something about the number of assaults inside prison walls that keep skyrocketing. Enough is enough. Our members cannot and should not be used as punching bags. End of quote. New York State Correction Officer Police Benevolent Association President Chris Summers said. Lyskoba members working in the most challenging of conditions are being assaulted at record rates. Yet their health and safety continue to be disregarded by those responsible for protecting the state workforce. Numbers. Summers said the statistics, which we've seen, speak volumes. He said that in 2024 is set to shatter last year's assault records, with assaults on staff projected to increase by 24%, marking a 47% rise since 2021. Recent data shows that both inmate on staff and inmate on inmate assaults have already exceeded 2023 levels, with 2 months still left in the calendar year, underscoring a crisis that shows no sign of improvement, the union said. Quote, inmate on inmate assaults are expected to surge by 37% from last year at a staggering 118% since 2021, Summers said. Wow. Quote, we have made it clear to the governor, state legislator, and docs that the system is unsustainable and the safety inside the facilities are being neglected by state leaders, end of quote. Summers blamed the progressive criminal justice policies and continued appeasement of inmate advocacy groups for leading to the unprecedented levels of violence within our prisons. The state's lack of action is an insult to the hardworking members of NYSCOBA, he said. There is no reasonable argument to be made that these policies have improved inside of our prisons. Yeah, I think what that shows. According to state data, as of October 27th, assaults on staff have reached 1,736, surpassing the 1,677 reported as 2023. At this pace, assaults are likely to exceed 2,000 for the first time, the union said. Inmate on inmate assaults currently stand at 2,423, also outpacing last year's total of 2,121. Making matters worse are the dwindling staffing levels and rising inmate population, the union said. Since January 3rd, 2023, there are 1,893 fewer correction officers in state facilities, while the inmate population has increased by 2,216. The state has been struggling to recruit and retain officers, the union said, largely because of the violence inside prisons. The state needs to make the job more attractive to prospective candidates and improve conditions of current officers who are leaving in droves, Summers said. Yeah, we've seen that. Officers are retiring early, resigning, or transferring to other agencies due to the violence and prison closures that have created undue hardships for them and their families. We have repeatedly presented the reality of the unsafe working environment facing our members, exasperated by a weakened disciplinary system, staffing shortages, and mandatory overtime that have pushed staff to the brink. State policies have directly contributed to this current state and need to be addressed immediately. Well, nothing said there should be a shock to everyone. I think everyone is in total agreement with Mr. Summers on that. But here's where it gets a little unique. So we have the rebuttal by the state. The State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, which oversees the state prison system, said they are working to address the issues raised by the union. DOC's Commissioner, Daniel F. Marticello, has been outspoken about his concern with the violence in DOC's correctional facilities. His Prison Violent Task Force continues to meet and strategize new methods to stop the violence, a statement said. But here's the best part. Wait till you hear this. While NYSCOBA attends these meetings, it is time that the union come participate with ideas that can be developed and implemented to decrease assaults on staff and on incarcerated individuals. Are you kidding me? So here it is again. Let's blame everybody but the person that's been in just about every position of docs. And you're blaming the union for not participating in prison task force meetings, or I won't say not participating, because he's saying that they just don't say anything while they do attend these meetings. Let me say what he says again. While NYSCOBA attends these meetings, it is time that the union come participate with ideas. Are you kidding me? I mean, this guy is just a blowhard. I mean, let's deflect and blame everybody but yourself. But I'll go on. Docs also said that the commissioner speaks regularly to the union and their executive committee discussing topics around the assaults on staff. And the department is implementing the governor-supported programming, bringing body scanners into DOC's facilities, piloting a new violence prevention strategy in 2 facilities, and continuing to add to the department's K-9 program. While any assault on someone is unacceptable, another indicator is the degree of injury resulting association with such assaults, Doc said. And there we go again. He's going right back to the public protection that the majority of no one leaves work injured, which we all know is a bunch of baloney. For the 3-month period of July, August, and September, the percentage of assaults on staff with no injury has been 97%. Again, any assault is completely unacceptable. Well, he does leave out the prior month where someone got their finger bitten off. So conveniently, statistics are for his benefit when he wants them. But let's digress that he kind of shades the black and white and only portrays what he wants to portray instead of being a true um, statistics of the department. That is totally unacceptable. Doc said the department also continues to work closely with regional district attorneys on prosecution of individuals who assault staff or another incarcerated person. As an example, they pointed to a recent case in Ulster County, which an inmate pled guilty to aggravated harassment of an employee by an incarcerated individual for throwing bodily fluids on a correction officer back in March. We're going to get to that article in a minute because that is true, though that is not the norm as far as prosecuting inmates. It is refreshing to see when that does happen. Docs also said they are working on recruitment of new officers. Docs has taken a number of actions to addressing the staffing shortages, including but not included to establishing a statewide recruiting union, increasing the starting salary for correction officer trainees, and contracting with a marketing firm to conduct targeted recruitment on social media platforms, the department said. And if you've been to any of the social media platforms on Docs, you can clearly see that they give the cannot read the room because most people that comment on there are saying how bad the department is and how they're totally neglecting officer and staff health and safety and well-being. So going on to get to the end of the article, we're into Jones' concern. State Assemblyman Billy Jones, a former correction officer, says he agrees with the union's assertions. The state needs to step up and stop the senseless violence in our correctional facilities, Jones said. The numbers simply don't lie. Assaults on staff and inmate assaults have increased tremendously in the last few years. Jones said it is no coincidence assaults have risen since the Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act was enacted in March of 2021. The measure severely limits the use of solitary confinement for inmates as a disciplinary method. This is exactly the reason why I voted no on HALT and have been advocating for a serious change to the law, Jones said. We also need to bring back an effective tier hearing system on the correctional facilities, which has been dismantled. Couldn't agree more. Our hardworking correction officers and civilians within our facilities deserve to work in a safe workplace. It's astonishing to me that the state would allow these unprecedented assaults to take place. We need to return to discipline within our correctional facilities and hold individuals responsible for their actions to ensure everyone is safe. Yeah, no brainer there, right? So again, Docs in its infinite wisdom, as I keep repeating over and over again, it just blames everybody but themselves and takes no responsibility for what happened. And there's the rest of the article that I just read in its entirety on the screen. And what you see is just mind boggling that anyone, including the governor herself, decides to take zero action, does not get involved, has not met or talked with or made any press conference or any help has been made to the facilities while these numbers keep going up. So everybody is just kind of singing kumbaya, get along, let's wait until what? There's a riot, a death, it's coming. I mean, we've talked about it. You've heard others on this podcast, the guests saying the same thing. It's just a matter of time. And unfortunately, no one wants to see that happen. But, you know, the inmate deaths have skyrocketed in the last couple of weeks. And we'll get to, as I talked in the last podcast, you know, that you keep seeing that trend. You know, the inmate that was stabbed the other inmate, or two inmates actually, and then the one inmate actually was deceased. The officer did a great job disarming the inmate, but not before one was stabbed to death and the other was severely injured. So guess what? HALT is working. It's just not, you know, it's just not acceptable. I mean, we just had another, you know, an inmate that I believe it was an overdose at Mid-State. You know, we've talked about a lot of them. Some of them I've been posting onto the news group, and some of them I have not. We just had another exposure at Fishkill where they rushed the inmate out in an ambulance. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. And what is the outcome? Nothing. Nothing changes. HALT is still enacted. There's been no changes. There's been no discussion changes. There's no been discussion of, hasn't been any discussion rather of repealing HALT or even taking a look and saying, let's go. You want to have this task force? How about having a task force about HALT? Give the direct correlation to here it is. And we'll get into reclassifying inmates as another Doc's way of smoke and mirrors, reclassing inmates as they close jails just because we can ship them out, reclassifying, wave a magic wand, inmates are all of a sudden no more of a disciplinary problem. That's horseshit. So, and we'll get on to that. And while we're on that topic, if anyone has any information, I received some. Obviously, it's confidential. You can read the last couple of inmates that have been involved in instances. I have their sheets, but I also would like to keep track of who's been reclassified, who's left, and I did receive some. So if you have any of that information, I'm always on the lookout for that as well. So next we have in the news, we have the Commission on the Legislative, Judicial, and Executive Compensation Board. They released a recommendation. They said that the legislator pay raises should stay this. There shouldn't be any, that they should remain flat. But the recommendations that this commission, and I'll read that in a minute, if they don't refute these findings, they're automatically take effect. So that would mean that the commissioner, I have that. Yeah, the commissioner here, would receive about a 20 to, depending on what commissioners, but we'll go with a correction commissioner. That means that he would go from a $220,000 a year commissioner salary to $245,000. So as you can see from See Through New York, I showed that last. You can see all of the Marticellos, which there's quite a few of them, 11 of them that are employed, not all through Docs, though the majority of them are. It's kind of like his own little fiefdom. You see that what his salary was there, and obviously that will increase to $2,221, $324. Obviously that will increase to the range of over $245,000 if the legislator doesn't refute this recommendation. So they said that the commissioner will get between a 20 and 25, depending on what agency and where they fall. And there was also, for some trainees, this does not include docs, but they will get an increase of $3,000. I know PEF was working with Division of Civil Service to get some of their trainees on board. And if you remember, docs last year, the year before, they did raise the salary for trainees. Obviously, that's not contractual. They can raise that. And obviously they're trying to increase anything they can do because the conditions are so bad with the working conditions. Who really wants the job? So we get into the Great Meadow in Sullivan. Obviously, that made the news. There was a great article about Great Meadow, the effects on the community, the financial impact, which is just mind-boggling. So the heart goes out to Great Meadow and Sullivan because obviously those are now closed facilities added to the rest of the closed facilities throughout the state. And we talk about the reclassification. So boom, all of a sudden you can wave a magic wand and Great Meadow inmates. Now all of a sudden they're Washington inmates. Imagine that. You can be a max and a medium all in the same day. Greenhaven, obviously that was on the news group. I put that out as far as the inmate was missing. There were some missteps in regards to that as well. I'm not going to get into the nuances, but that is some news that the inmate was missing for over 2.5 hours, and they were later found in the J Building school. So the next is the governor press release. That was out. The union put out a press release. Weapons seized, officers assaulted, visitor arrested at Governor Correctional Facility. This was on November 1st, 2024. And that was incidents occurred in a 1 month period as a single year record for assaults is broken. We can't harp on that enough because it keeps coming out. Assaults on staff and inmate on inmate assaults statewide set a single year record by the end of October, breaking last year's record with 2 months left in the calendar year. The latest statistics mirror what Governor Correctional Facility continues to grapple with a high number of assaults and contraband, including multiple makeshift weapons at the medium security correctional facility. During the month of August, staff recovered 14 makeshift weapons from inmates during pat frisk and searches of the inmates' living quarters. One inmate was found to have in his possession a metal scalpel just prior to him being transferred for a court appearance. In the same time period, 8 staff, including 2 sergeants, were injured during 7 assaults on staff by inmates. The assaults follow the year-long pattern of violence, which assaults on staff are on a pace to increase 24% from last year, and inmate-on-inmate assaults are on pace to rise 37%. In the last 4 years, assaults have increased by 47% and a whopping 118% in those categories, respectively. Inmate fights continue to plague the prison. 9 inmates were injured at the facility when they were attacked by other inmates, including 1 inmate who sustained a fractured jaw and 3 who sustained lacerations after being cut with a makeshift weapon. In addition, 2 visitors were arrested for promoting prison contraband after a canine alerted on them during inmate visits. Both visitors turned over the drugs, which contained marijuana. The statistics just released by docs tell the true picture of the dangerous environment and violence in our state prisons. The statistics don't lie. Our prisons are as violent as they've ever been, and our members are being attacked on a daily basis. The system is unsustainable with short staffing, mandatory overtime, and a disciplinary system that is so weak, inmates know that there are no ramifications for their actions. It is wishful thinking to think that the state legislators who ushered in these progressive criminal justice policies that have contributed to the violence will do anything to correct the current state that the prisons are in when they go back into session in January. Until that occurs, the violence will no doubt continue to set yearly records to our members, and inmates who follow the rules will bear the brunt of that, stated Brian Aluska, Central Region Vice President. And can't argue with that, as that is obviously a microcosm of what's going on throughout the whole state system, and we see that happening almost daily. It's just unbelievable. And that was done. That report was reported in News Junkie, so I give them the proper credit for that. And also, we have the Mid Hudson News. They put out the report from the DA that was mentioned earlier in the press release. The DA from the area put out the press release of Christian Fernandez, 27, of Fishkill, currently at Eastern Correctional Facility, threw his urine at the face, mouth, and clothing of a state correction officer on March 9th while at the prison medical unit. And quote, "No one deserves such dehumanizing and despicable assault," said District Attorney Emmanuel Niji. "Every officer must be able to expect that at the end of the shift, she or he will go home to family without fear of infection or contaminating loved ones." And that is perfectly said. I just wish the commissioner and this governor would share those exact same thoughts, that everyone deserves to go home in the same condition that they came in with. And it is good to see this prosecuted. Obviously, the sentencing for that will not happen until next month. And if we do find out the conviction for Christian Fernandez, we will report that when we get that. The other one was another incident that came out that was on News 10 in the Finger Lakes Times concerning 5 Points. It was labeled the poster child for violence. 9 officers were injured, 1 with a broken nose, and we'll surmise all of this. The 2 weeks of violence coming from September to October. You could see that the pattern of violence, and this was released by Kenny Gold, the Western Region Vice President. The governor and the legislature have turned their backs on us. And, you know, that's really the pattern. You see the pattern with all these press releases and everything that's happening. You're learning more and more now more than ever, which also goes to the fact that, again, I'm a little biased, but as you've seen came out from the elections, one of the caveats that came out was that podcasters now are replacing the news, and I depend on the news to get a lot of the information out. But the podcasts speak to specific individuals or specific entities, so it's good to see that podcasters are getting a little recognition. So a little shameless plug. And then, as I reported in the groups, we had the incident at Sing Sing. The inmate had a couple of ceramic blades. The inmate went into his pocket, pulled out the makeshift weapon. The officer was injured with cuts to his neck, punctured wounds, thigh and finger and arms. He was taken out by ambulance, and the 4 officers that responded had also injuries to them. And I can't remember the exact number of stitches that officer, the one that got caught, again, the officer was injured with cuts to his neck. And then he had punctured wounds in his thigh, finger, and arms, and others were injured as well, the other 4, but the other 4 did remain on duty. So again, another bad incident, another officer taken out by ambulance to the hospital. When does this end, people? When does this end? I just don't believe that there's any end in sight because no one's doing anything. I mean, at this point, it becomes a matter of, and it's been mentioned in the survey last time where the people wanted to take civil action against the department and the governor as far as not being protected. They wanted the union to file lawsuits against the state. I mean, something has to change because the working conditions are just not changing. The working conditions are getting worse instead of better. And I just don't know how the department or the officers and all staff, not just the officers, sustain the level of violence that's being created by these insane, and I mean that when I say insane, they're insane policies. And obviously, it's not all policies created by docs. Obviously, a lot of that is legislative driven, but docs adds insult to injury with some of the things that they do, and giving people Fitbits and let them cook one day a week is not the answer. Though it's appreciated, it's definitely not the answer. But as you could see that, when the beginning of the year, when we mentioned the great idea by the commissioner to give incentives for the inmates to behave and giving them pizza parties and certain ice cream socials and what have you, it's not working. Sorry, Commissioner, your pizza, I know you probably like pizza as much as the next guy, but the pizza's not working. Time to move on. Instead of blaming the union, man up, take responsibility, and change the direction that the department is heading because it's going off a cliff. You've held every position within docs, from the director of personnel to the current commissioner now, confirmed commissioner, that is. So, the buck stops with you. Accept it. So we have 2 polls. Obviously, the first one we'll put in is the do you believe, I'm going to put that up for you. This is the safety survey. Do you believe New York State and docs is doing everything they can to keep employees safe inside New York State prisons? So I wanted to get to that. Obviously, I put that out for 2 days. So we only have a short snapshot of 367 people that participated in that survey. But the survey just gives you an idea. Believe it or not, there was one person that said, yes, I believe that they are doing everything they can to keep employees safe inside. So, but the majority, over 99.9%, said, no, I believe that they should do more to keep employees safe. And as we just read through the news, that the assaults, the statistics is alarming. So this is not me. I didn't participate in this survey. It wasn't exactly what you see there is exactly how it was presented. So there was no leaning or trying to steer people in a different direction, though I think we could all guess for ourselves just with the assault numbers alone and people that are working, you'd have to live underneath the rock to not realize what's going on here. So no being the answer to that question. Do you believe New York State and docs is doing everything they can to keep employees safe inside New York State prisons? And 366 people, no, I believe they should do more to keep the employees safe. So that should come as no shock to anyone there. And the other one, because I got quite a bit of feedback from the last survey when we were talking about it. Cameras came up. as far as not directly as far as safety and security, though that we're going to get to this poll in a minute, because the majority, not all, it was good to see a poll that was not completely lopsided. It was overwhelmingly stated that most people, what their position was on the cameras. I don't want to ruin it till we put the poll up, but a lot of people, and Docs has showed this, even with the static cameras that came in years ago. And I've always, being the disciplinary lieutenant in years past, made S-block videos, whether it be cell extractions, assaults, what have you, fires, guy landing on his head, all kinds of crazy stuff. But we used the videos and to find out information. And if anyone's followed the podcast, I've never been a believer that the way that New York State does, or the agency does, the unusual incident reports, because it's a textbook boxerplate, lock you in that you take this boilerplate and you write it exactly the same for every incident. The only thing that changes is the names, body holds, what have you, if it's a use of force UI. But on the most part, you're locked in. And as we all know, that the incidents cannot be looked at underneath the microscope like that. It does not happen. Everything is unique. Not only are the individuals unique, the situation's unique, and to have a boilerplate template, I understand why they do it, because they're afraid of lawsuits and everything else. They don't believe that the staff can think for themselves, and they want everything into this little matchbox compartmentalized report, and it doesn't work that way. And this came out. So let's get into the camera poll. And it says, what are your feelings about body-worn cameras that are in some New York State correctional facilities? Do you think they help or hurt? And do you think they diminish or embolden violent conduct by inmates? So the question was put out in the poll: do you support the body-worn cameras under the current docs policies? And there was a lot of comments that came with this, both good and bad. And I received countless emails, including websites to the Axon body cameras, when we'll get into that in a second. But this had over 600 responses, and the majority of people, which I was kind of shocked at, no, I do not support body-worn cameras as currently implemented by docs. And that was 96%. 582 votes came in for that said, no, I do not support body-worn cameras. And there was a 4%, 20 votes that came in that said, yes, I support the body-worn cameras as currently implemented by docs. And I don't think people are necessarily against the body cameras. It's how docs operates. And it was there when it was implemented or discussed about the cameras. The cameras were going to be a great thing. Static cameras, I'm going back to, because I'm kind of dating myself, going back that far in time. And as we know, that they can be a double-edged sword. And if you're doing something wrong, which we should all be trying to do the right thing, obviously it could come back. But the biggest thing that comes out is not if you're doing something wrong, is that if you are involved in a situation, docs would not allow anybody to have a discussion or go back and review the video. And if you did, you had to get permission from the DEP. And that was one of the biggest complaints that came out in this survey, is that I want to be able to come out. I want to be able to review the video, because I can't remember every nuance of the incident. Your adrenaline's going. We all know that. I do in my report based off my memory. And I want to be able to look at that incident. And if you were injured and you were out for any length of time, we all know that if it happened a week or 2 weeks later, your memory is not as fresh as it was that 30 minutes, hour, whatever it is after the incident. So it just makes sense to, as far as reviewing. There was a lot of talk as far as the comments that were made, both supporting the cameras, and that, at least that if I was getting blamed for something, the camera says exactly what the inmate did. There was a lot of responses on that, which was good to see. And obviously that part is a good thing, but a lot of it came back that no, the department doesn't trust staff. The common complaint that it cannot review for report writing, as other agencies do. Most anybody that has a friend in law enforcement, especially the police, they're obviously allowed to do their body-worn cameras as report writing to come back on that. And the other thing that came out is the department doesn't trust its staff. And then some even went into some of the policies and procedures about it being turned on, outer worn garment. That makes sense. Camera does not record at this point, but you turn it on. And then there's the camera retention, which is supposed to be done by a supervisor, the rank of captain. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I'm not going to say that people delegate. But getting back to that, even when I went on to, because someone came out with the Axion webpage, and they had this fallback feature with video recall. So one of the things that I found unique on that is, and I don't know if it's changed, so I don't want to misspeak, but I thought that it was always explained that with the body worn cameras, that the camera, even though you didn't press the recording button yet, when you start your shift, you turn it on, it doesn't record, but it does record. And when you do finally repress, or if you're having an incident, record button, that it could record up to 30 seconds earlier of when you hit the start button for recording. So when I looked on the website, as someone else had stated, it doesn't just say that 30 seconds prior to being turned on. That's what Doc said. Now, I don't know if this is a different programming system, but as far as the body cam Model 3, it stated that it would have 18 hours of continuous recording, and that someone from an administrator position the average person could not, but someone from the administration position could go back and look at that camera. And just because you didn't hit the recording button, it could record. And in there, the company gives a disclaimer saying that they don't support that because officers are entitled to privacy if they're using the bathroom, blah, blah, blah. But it did state that on there, and it was called the fallback feature. So I'm not that versed on it, so I don't want to misspeak in saying that that's happening, but it was kind of, it's on their website. You can find it at Axon.com, and you can look up the different models of the body cameras, and you can look under the search and get the fallback feature and not take my word for it, and see that for yourself, because I was a little bit surprised that according to this fallback feature that someone, and it couldn't be accessed by everybody, but they have an admin password and they'd be able to get on there and they could see more of the incident, even to the 30 seconds. But I digress. I can't say that that's fact, but that is what is on the website. So with that said, that's where you're at with the body cameras, that over 96% do not support the body worn cameras. They feel that another comment that it emboldened the inmates more than it helped the officers, which we all know that when the static cameras came out, that was one of the things that the problems that existed. It emboldened the inmates. They were, making remarks and what to do and what to suck and go do this. And we're all thick-skinned, so I don't think anybody should be alarmed at the language. But the other caveat out of that too is if you misspeak or swear, you also shouldn't be disciplined for saying something back either. But those are the two. So I mean, coupled docs not being the survey, it doesn't look like docs or the state, or a combination of both, has got the safety and security of the officers and staff in mind. And most people were against the cameras. So shocking. I didn't think it would be that overwhelming, but it was good to see a poll where we had some great dialogue, and there was two sides of a coin to actually speak on. So the next episode I'm trying to get, and I mentioned it earlier, is the reclassification of inmates, because I think that is going on, especially with the closures of 2 maximum security jails, or prisons, I should say, that they're reclassifying inmates and moving that. So if anyone has any information at all, please get that to me. I'd be more than happy to look at that information and look at anything that you have. And I appreciate the information that people have already given me, whether it be the information on reclassifications, whether it be incidents at a facility. My time is limited, so I haven't been able to keep up on a timely manner as I have just a couple of weeks ago. But please get that, keep giving me that information. I truly appreciate it and everything that we can. I don't put out every incident for obvious reasons, but I do put out what I can and what I verify is factual. So, and as you see, that a lot of these incidents that I discussed today have never made the news, whether that's by design, maybe the people didn't want to report it to the news. And in other incidences, they have been reported, but the news agencies never picked it up. There's also a bias that goes on that if it's, an inmate, obviously that they're quick to print that. And if it has to go against an inmate assaulting an officer, they're not so much. Not all news agencies are like that, but that is a theme. But to not get the information out there, which some don't believe in, I think does the officers and the staff unjust, because the more people that know about it and hear this, the better. And for you not to share that, I think does a harm than good. Obviously, there's some things that you just can't put out there, and I certainly understand that. But that will bring us back to the assaults that are just amazing. And, I just want to end this episode on that. Obviously, the survey was a big deal. I wanted to get that information out. The news group, I wanted to get a lot of the news that was out there. But these numbers and the new record is just mind-boggling. And not to beat the drum of the commissioner threatening as I opened up. But when do people have enough and say, yeah, we're tired of the assaults, we're tired of the inmates, but when are you tired of the commissioner threatening you? When are you tired of the commissioner blaming everybody else? I mean, obviously it's the old mantra, CYA, cover my ass or cover your ass, but to blame everybody else. If we did that as security or civilian staff and didn't take responsibility for something that we did, is just mind-boggling. And then you have other administrators that put people in harm's way or not report an incident for 2.5 hours. And if that was an officer that did that, they'd be disciplined and locked out instantly. And when it happens to administrators, there's a totally different set of values. There's a total double standard. There's no discipline or a stern talking to, so to speak. There's no repercussions, and you see that time and time again. We've seen people where administrators have badmouthed staff and told them to work at McDonald's and other things, and there's just been, you get rewarded for bad behavior. It's almost like the administrations and some of the management, this is not all by any means, because a lot of the management supply me and give me good information and tell me, and kudos to them, and they're running good facilities and doing good things in building 4, and some others not so much. And I just can't wrap my head around the responsibility part. It's, if you did something, own it. But to pass blame and say we have this and blame the union, and we're going to close more facilities, I'm not a subscriber to that. Never have been. I haven't been when I was a supervisor. I wasn't when I was an officer. If I screwed up, I owned it. If I screwed up and put somebody else in harm's way, I wanted to make sure that they didn't get in trouble. I did. I owned it, owned what I did, my share of the responsibility, as it should be. But to blame and deflect, that's absolutely disgusting. And the threat to your own workforce when you already have a morale problem. And let's talk about morale for a minute before we close. The morale is totally in the shitter, and this is going to bring up morale, these new record number of assaults. I don't think so. That's going to get more people to take the job. No. And as we discussed before, you're not only having a problem with getting new people in the door. Yeah, you're doing regional recruiting. Recruiting numbers are going to pick up. How many people, and from some of the people that I talk to of employee investigations, they're having a tough time. Yeah, they're getting the applicants in, but they're having a tough time with them completing the process. So though the numbers look good on paper, and they are getting more, there's no denying about that. But how many are going to stick it out in a year when they can't go home, when they're mandated, when they're assaulted? And how many good people? I don't know if I touched on this. I want to say I have, but I can't bring this up enough. Is when recruiting is great. But when you're losing seasoned veteran staff is when you have a problem. When a facility goes too much in the newbie, and there's nothing wrong with having newbies, but when you have too much and you lose the experience on top, bad things happen. And when you look at facilities, not just in New York State, but all over, because I'm working with another entity and another group, and I'm looking at their stats. And when you have a top heavy, low experience, but people with 5 years less are on the job, that's where you create a lot of problems. You're losing valuable staff, and nobody, very few people are sticking around saying that, hey, I can't wait to work another 12 years after I hit my 25th. Not saying that some people aren't doing it, but the majority are running for the door. And when you lose that, people that need to be retained, not just because you need the bodies, that should be number one, but because you're taking all that experience, all that money you've invested in them over the years, and they're basically saying, screw you, I've had enough of this. I want to go home to my family. I'm not sticking around. I don't care what I do. I'm just not sticking in here. I stuck out so I can get my 25 years in. After 25 years in a minute, I'm gone. And you're losing that. That is valuable. That is very valuable. It's not only valuable to the new people that are walking in to the door, it's valuable to the management staff that are in there, because you can trust and you know that these people have experience and are going to do the right thing. And God forbid, if somebody has a bad day, they're going to be there and know what to do. It's just that I can't stress that enough. You can't look at just recruitment. Retention has to also be part of that. And right now, you're not retaining good people because they're running for the hills. And the resignations, obviously, we just had the 2 closed facilities. So some of the resignations that people have sent to me, I don't have this number for a fact, but I would imagine they have just skyrocketed their resignations for the last 2 months since they've done the prison closures and actually did the RIF, and their facilities are now mothballed and closed. So you're not just retention; you're also getting people that are just resigning. I just can't get it. But as it be safe out there. I wanted to end on a positive note. And as I say with every podcast, be kind, because you never know what the person next to you is going through. And we've had a lot of people that have been severely hurt. So my heart and prayers are out with them. And we've had also a lot of recently deaths, not just docs, but just law enforcement deaths that are out there. So my heart and prayers go out to them and their families as well. So again, this is Vinny Blasio with the Working in Hell podcast. Be safe out there, everyone, and have a great day.
You've been listening to the Working in Hell podcast with Vinny Blasio. Find this podcast on any of your favorite platforms like Audible, iHeart, and Spotify. And be sure to check out www.workinginhell.com for more information and important links. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.